been reading. In new literatures in English, we talk about the literature from countries like Australia, Pakistan, India, Africa, Caribbean, and other countries. So we focused on the themes, we focused on the symbols used, we focused on two case studies yesterday, and today onwards we are going to actually discuss about the novels, the plays, the poems, the epics that are considered under as one group of new literatures in English. So, should we begin, all of you? So, I would request all of you to pay attention to today's uh, block 2, today's write up that we are going to take. And take this as not only a case study but also learnings and how the writer has actually used the themes or the symbols or the concept of it, so everything in and around how what might have prompted the author to write such a beautiful piece. So let's begin. The book is A Grain of Wheat by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o is a prominent Kenyan writer. He is also an academic and a social activist. He is basically known for his significant contributions to African literature, post-colonial studies, and the promotion of indigenous languages. He was born in January 5th, 1938 in Kamirithu. This is a small village in Limru, Kenya, and he grew up during a period of intense social and political upheaval, which greatly influenced his literary and political views. Ngwingi was born into a large peasant family during the era of British colonial rule in Kenya. So, because there was a violent suppression in the Mau Mau rebellion, the farming community, he was deeply affected by the anti-colonial uprising, and that prompted him to take up lot of causes to write what he has written, and we are going to focus on that. Most of his early works were written in English and reflected uh, most of his experiences on colonialism and beyond. His first novel was Weep Not Child, which was written in 1964, and it explored how the Mau Mau community, the impact of the Mau Mau uprising, and the struggle for independence on Kenyan society. Good evening, Annie. So, post that, Weep Not Child, he wrote another novel that was in 1965, The River Between, which dealt with the clash between traditional Kikuyu customs and Christianity. So most of the words that will be used here, that belongs to completely African literature and African community. So some of the words you might think that they're a bit out of the context because they are not English words, they are places. So just pay attention to those words. So the book actually. The River Between, yes, his subsequent novel, The River Between, symbolized the broader cultural conflicts under colonialism. However, this particular novel that we are going to discuss today, A Grain of Wheat, which was written in 1967, it established him as a major African writer. So that's the reason why we are delving deep into this particular novel. This novel set against the backdrop of the Kenyan struggle for independence, and it is also known for its complex narrative structure and its exploration of themes like betrayal, sacrifice, and effects of colonialism. So, this was a bit regarding the author's background. Let's now focus on the concept of the book. A Grain of Wheat was published in 1967, and it is considered to be one of the most significant works of African literature. Set in the days leading up to Kenya's independence from British colonial rule, the novel explores the complex interplay of personal and national history. It delves into the psychological and social impact of colonialism and the Mau Mau rebellion on individuals and communities. The title, taken from the Bible, alludes to the idea of sacrifice and regeneration, which are the central themes in the novel, reflecting the sacrifices made for Kenya's independence and the hope for a new beginning. A bit of background here: this book was written during the periodic event, which is significant enough for the political and social changes in Kenya. The country had recently gained independence from British colonial rule in 1963, and the euphoria of freedom, which is called as uhuru in African language, uhuru, freedom, was tempered by the realities of building a new nation. Ngwingi, who was deeply involved in the political and cultural life of Kenya, was concerned with the direction the country was taking under its new leadership. The novel reflects Ngwingi's own disillusionment with the post colonial government, particularly its failure to address the needs of the common people and its perpetuation of the same oppressive structures that characterized colonial rule. Nguyen's later works would continue to explore these themes, and he would eventually be imprisoned for his outspoken criticism of the Kenyan government. Nguyen's decision to write in English rather than his native language, which is called as Gikuyu, was also significant. While A Grain of Wheat was written in English, Nguyen's would later shift to writing exclusively in Gikuyu as part of his broader commitment to decolonizing African literature and promoting indigenous languages. So, let us now discuss about the characters. There are majorly 5 to 6 important characters in the entire book. First is Mugo. Now, this Mugo is basically a very solitary figure who harbors a deep secret. Mugo is emblematic of the moral ambiguities and psychological trauma resulting from the colonialism and the Mau Mau rebellion. His internal conflict and eventual confession highlights the themes of guilt, betrayal, and redemption. We will see how. There is one more character which is called as which is known as Kihika.
Bobby, your microphone is on. Your mic is on.
Yes, anyone saying something? Okay. So this is the next character, which is was known as Kihika, a symbol of resistance and martyrdom. Kihika is a character that represents the idealism and heroism of the anti-colonial struggle. His death in the community serves as a constant reminder of the sacrifices made for independence. There is this third character, Gikonyo, a complex character who embodies the personal and societal challenges of the post colonial period. Gikonyo's imprisonment and subsequent excuse me, disillusionment reflect the broader disillusionment with the post independence reality. There is a fourth character known as Mumbi. As Gikonyo's wife, Mumbi represents the resilience of women during the struggle. Her beauty, strength, and vulnerability makes her one of the most compelling characters in the novel. She has an affair with Karanja during Gikonyu's imprisonment, and this underscores the personal cost of the political struggle also. Karanja is a tragic figure. This is another character. And Karanja's collaboration with the British and his feelings of inadequacy makes him a more complex antagonist. His actions reflect the moral compromises and betrayals that were a part of the colonial experience. There are two more characters, General R. Warway and Wambui. These characters represent the older generation of freedom fighters whose experiences and perspectives provide a broader context for the younger characters' struggle. Now, these are the characters. Let's move to the plot part. The plot very seems very non-linearly. It is structured. The novel itself is structured in a very non-linear manner. It weaves together stories of various characters in a small Kenyan village as they prepare to celebrate Uhuru. Uhuru is the African term for freedom. The story begins with Mugo, a reclusive and a mysterious figure, who is asked to give a speech at the Uhuru celebrations. As the narrative unfolds, it is revealed that Mugo is tormented by a dark secret. He betrayed Kihika, a local hero of the Mau Mau resistance, to the colonial authorities. Now, Kihika is a charismatic leader who becomes a martyr for independence cause after being captured and executed by British. His death symbolizes the sacrifices made for her freedom, for the freedom. Gikonyo, a successful farmer, and his wife Mumbi are the central to the novel's exploration of personal and national betrayal. Gikonyo's imprisonment during the rebellion and his subsequent return home reveals the strain places on their marriage. Mumbi's infidelity during Gikonyo's absence, resulting in the birth of Karanja's child, reflects the personal cost of the struggle for independence. Karanja, which is also again a key character we talked about, represents collaboration with the colonial regime. He becomes a traitor to his people by working as a home guard, betraying the Mau Mau fighters. This relationship with Mumbi and his people, or his feelings of inadequacy, further complicate his character. The novel also explores the lives of other villagers, such as the two other characters, General R. Warwi and Wombai, who are involved in the independence movement and grapple with the consequences of their actions. You'll find as the story progresses, the characters' past are revealed through flashbacks. That's the reason why the story is generally weaved in a non-linear action, leading to climatic moment where Mugo confesses his betrayal of Kihika. The novel concludes with Mugo's confession, which serves as a cathartic movement for the community, symbolizing the need for reconciliation and forgiveness in the post colonial era. If we go to appreciate the novel critically, you will find that A Grain of Wheat is widely regarded as a masterpiece of African literature and one of Ngugi's wa Thiong'o's most accomplished works. The novel's structure, that is making sure that the flashbacks comes in again and again, so the non-linear structure with its intricate use of perspectives, multiple characters or multiple perspectives, allows for a deep exploration of the psychological and the social effects of colonialism. Ngugi's prose is both lyrical and powerful, capturing the landscape and ethos of Kenya on the brink of independence. The novel's exploration of themes such as betrayal, sacrifice, complexities of freedoms has made it a seminal work in post colonial literature. Nguyen's portrayal of the moral ambiguities and personal conflicts that accompany the national struggle for independence provides a nuanced understanding of the post colonial experiences. His critique of both colonial and post colonial leadership reflects his broader political and ideological concerns, particularly his later embrace of socialism and advocacy for the use of indigenous languages in African literature. Let's discuss about some of the prominent themes like betrayal, sacrifice. Throughout the novel, you will find them. The theme of betrayal is the central to novel, particularly the theme of betrayal, with multiple characters who are struggling with their own acts of betrayal. Mugo's betrayal of Kahika, Gionko's emotional betrayal by Mumbi, Karanja's betrayal of his people, all serve to highlight the personal and communal costs of independence struggle. The novel actually examines how these betrayals affect the character's sense of identity and belonging. The second best theme post betrayal and guilt is sacrifice and martyrdom. The idea of sacrifice is embodied in the character of Kihika, whose martyrdom becomes a symbol of the collective sacrifices made for Kenya's independence. The novel suggests that the path to freedom is fraught with personal loss and that the idealism of the independence movement often comes at a great cost. Now, the third one as a theme is colonialism and its aftermath. Nguigis critically examines the legacy of colonialism, focusing on the psychological and social scars it leaves on individuals and communities. The novel portrays the complexities of the transition from colonial rule to independence, highlighting the challenges of building a new nation on the ruins of the old order. Identity is also one of the major theme, and nationalism is also one of the major theme. And the struggle to forge a national identity in the wake of colonialism is a recurring theme in the novel. The characters' personal journeys are intertwined with the larger national narrative, reflecting the tensions between individual desires and collective aspirations. Now, one more theme which we find in the novel is the gender and the power play. The novel also explores the role of women in the independence struggle, with Mumbi serving as a key figure in this regard. Her experiences reflect the broader issues of gender and power in a patriarchal society, as well as the ways in which women navigate the challenges of both colonialism and nationalism. The last theme, which is predominant in the entire novel, is reconciliation and forgiveness. The novel's conclusion with Mugo's confession and the community's reaction underscores the importance of reconciliation and forgiveness in the post colonial context. Ngugi suggests that healing the wounds of the past is essential for building a just and equitable society. If you think about what can be the significance of this novel, you will come to know that A Grain of Wheat is significant for its portrayal of the complexities of the Kenyan independence movement and its aftermath. The novel's exploration of the moral and psychological dimensions of the anti colonial struggle provides a profound commentary on the human condition. Ngugi's use of multiple perspectives and non linear narrative techniques reflects the fragmented nature of post colonial identity and history. The novel is also important for its critique of the post colonial elite, who, according to Ngugi, have betrayed the ideals of the independence movement. By focusing on the personal and communal consequences of this betrayal, Ngugi's challenges readers to consider the cost of political power and the responsibilities that come with it. So, before we move to chapter analysis and significance of the lines, we quickly revise what we had been discussing for the last 18 minutes. We started with the author's background. We come to know that Ngugi Thingwango is a prominent Kenyan writer. His early works were Weep Not Child and The River in Between, and his third book, A Grain of Wheat, established him as a major African writer. The concept of the novel talks about the Kenya's independence from British colonial rule, and they are celebrating Uhuru, which is the African term for freedom, and it explores the complex interplay between personal and national history. We talked about the background. We also talked about the characters. I would want to repeat the characters again: Mugo, Kihika, Gikonyo, Mumbi, Karanza, General R. Warwai, and Wambui. These are some of the characters, important characters. The plot happens with a mysterious figure, that is Mugo, who is asked to give a speech during the Uhuru celebrations. Kihika is a charismatic leader, and death becomes a symbol for the sacrifices made for the freedom. Gikongu and Mumbi, they are into marriage, but then there is infidelity by Mumbi during Gikongu's absence. And then Karanja is another key character who becomes the traitor to his people, and that's the reason why he is into guilt and submission. There are other villagers also. Now, we critically also appreciated the novel as yet, and then we talked about the prominent themes. The prominent themes become betrayal and guilt, sacrifice and martyrdom, colonialism and its aftermath, identity and nationalism, gender and power, reconciliation and forgiveness. These are the things. We also talked about how important is grain of wheat, since it exhibits the complexities of Kenyan independence movement and its aftermath. Now we'll start with chapter 1. We'll talk about some of the lines from chapter 1. We will do a critical analysis, and we will also discuss about the significance of the lines, how why they're important. We'll talk about that. So chapter 1, this is the beginning of the story. The village was awakening, faint rays of the sun filtering through the leaves of trees and making a golden haze through the smoke that rose from the huts. It was peaceful, deceptively so, with the land slowly being claimed back by the people who had fought for it. So I'll repeat it. The village was awakening, faint rays of the sun filtering through the leaves of trees and making a golden haze through the smoke that rose from the huts. It was peaceful and deceptively so, with the land slowly being claimed by the people who had fought for it. If you just look at the lines, if you read them mindfully, you'll clearly understand what does it mean and signify. The novel opens with a description of the village at dawn that symbolizes a new beginning for the people who have endured the struggle for independence. The imagery of the golden haze and the peaceful atmosphere, this creates a serene yet ominous mood reflecting the deceptive calm that masks the underlying tensions within the village. This passage is important because it sets the tone for the novel. It introduces the reader to the aftermath of the Mau Mau rebellion and the fragile peace that exists in the wake of the struggle. The land being claimed back symbolizes the people's efforts to regain control of their lives and their country, but the word deceptively hints at the unresolved conflicts and betrayals that would unfold as the story progresses. If you read it again, you'll find it that the description of the village that wakes up to a new day parallels the larger theme of awakening in a post-colonial Kenya. The villagers are beginning to reclaim their lands and their identities in other way after years of colonial oppression. However, the use of the word deceptively suggests that this place is not as secure as it seems. Beneath the surface, there are lingering scars from the past, and the struggle for the true freedom and reconciliation is far from over. This passage also foreshadows the central conflict of the novel, where personal and collective betrayals come to light, challenging the fragile unity of the community. The contrast between the peaceful setting and the underlying tension reflects the complexities of post independence Kenya, where the victory of independence is tempered by the difficulties of nation building. So we go to the next uh, passage from the same chapter, chapter 1. In the dark stillness of his hut, Mugo lay awake, staring into the void, thinking of the many days and nights he had spent alone, locked in his own thoughts, afraid of what might come if he let them out. I'll speak out again. In the dark stillness of his hut, Mugo lay awake, staring into the void, thinking of the many days and nights he had spent alone, locked in his own thoughts, afraid of what might come if he let them out. Now, this excerpt introduces Mugo as a solitary figure. He is haunted by his past, he is consumed by his inner turmoil. His isolation is both physical and emotional, and he is described as lying awake and staring into the void. This suggests a sense of emptiness and disconnection from the world around him. This passage is significant because it establishes Mugo's character as one who is deeply troubled by his past actions. His fear of letting his thoughts out hints at the guilt and shame he carries, which will become a central element of the novel's plot. Mugo's solitude also reflects the broader theme of alienation in post colonial society. where individuals struggle to reconcile their personal experiences with the collective memory of the struggle for independence. Buko's solitude is a manifestation of his psychological state, where his internal conflict prevents him from engaging with others. The word void that he stares at into represents the moral and emotional emptiness he feels, as well as the unresolved trauma of his past. His fear of letting his thoughts out suggests that he is hiding a dark secret, which adds to the suspense and tension in the story. This excerpt also touches on the theme of silence and its consequences. Mugo's inability to communicate his feelings and confess his guilt isolates him further, creating a barrier between him and the community. His silence is both a source of his suffering and a reflection of the broader silence surrounding the traumas of the colonial period, where many wounds remain unspoken and uphealed. Next, the same chapter, the next lines, important lines. The people gathered in the marketplace to discuss the coming Uru. But even as they talked, there was a sense of uncertainty, as if they were unsure of what freedom would truly bring. The people gathered in the marketplace to discuss the coming Uhuru. But even as they talked, there was a sense of uncertainty, as if they were unsure of what freedom would truly bring. This is one of the most significant line because although they are celebrating freedom, they are unsure of what freedom would truly bring. This excerpt captures the mood of anticipation and uncertainty in the village as the people gather in the marketplace to discuss about the upcoming independence or Uhuru. While there is excitement about the end of colonial rule, there is also a palpable sense of anxiety about the future and what it will hold for the community. This passage is important because it highlights the ambivalence that many people feel about independence. While Uhuru or freedom represents the achievement of a long fought struggle, it also brings with it new challenges and uncertainties. The people's uncertainty reflects the broader theme of disillusionment that runs throughout the novel, as the reality of independence does not always live up to the expectations that were placed upon it. The gathering in the marketplace symbolizes the collective anticipation of the community as a stand on the brink of a new era. However, the sense of uncertainty suggests that independence is a not a clear-cut victory, but a complex transition that brings both hope and fear. The people's discussion reflect their hopes for a better future, but also their doubts about whether true freedom can actually be achieved. This passage emphasizes the themes of collective identity and the challenges of nation building. As the villagers prepare for Uhuru, they must confront the realities of what it means to build a new nation, with all the political and social economic challenges that it entails. The marketplace is seen as a public space where ideas are exchanged, where people communicate with each other, and that represents the ongoing dialogue about the future of Kenya, where the hopes of independence are tempered by the realities of post colonial life. The next chapter, chapter 2, we pick here also some lines. We discuss about the lines, we talk about the analysis, we talk about the significance. In chapter 2, there is some of the reflections on loneliness of Mugo that is mentioned. So the lines are: for a moment, Mugo felt an odd relief at being alone. He no longer had to keep up a pretense. But the relief quickly gave way to an overwhelming loneliness that gnawed at his insides, a loneliness that had become his constant companion. For a moment, Mogo felt an odd relief at being alone. He no longer had to keep up a pretense. But the relief quickly gave way to an overwhelming loneliness that gnawed at his insides, a loneliness that had become his constant companion. Now, this passage delves deeper into Mugo's character. We already know Mugo is a solitary character, illustrating his complex relationship with solitude. While Mugo initially feels relief in being alone, as it allows him to drop the facade he maintains in front of others, this relief is now fleeting. His loneliness is described as something that gnawed at his insides, that emphasizes the intensity of this loneliness and the psychological burden that he is carrying. This passage is important because it highlights the inner conflict within Mugo, who is torn between his desire for solitude and the crushing weight of loneliness. His isolation is emblematic of the larger themes of alienation and disconnectedness in the entire novel, where characters struggle to reconcile their individual experiences with the collective history of their community. Mugo's momentary relief at being alone suggests that he finds social interaction exhausting and prefers the solitude where he does not have to pretend. However, this relief quickly turns into loneliness again, indicating that Mugo is trapped in a cycle of isolation and emotional detachment. The loneliness that gnawed at his insides is a vivid metaphor for the deep seated emotional pain that Mugo endures, which has become an inescapable part of his life. This excerpt also foreshadows the pivotal role that Mugo's solitude and inner turmoil will play in the unfolding of the novel's events. His inability to connect with others and his fear of revealing his true self contribute to the nation of tension and suspense that permeates the story. Few more lines from the same chapter. Mugo had no idea why the villagers regarded him with such respect, why they seemed to expect something from him. He had never sought their admiration, yet it clung to him like a burden he could not shake off. This clearly states the villagers' expectations of Mugo. I'll read it again. Mugo had no idea why the villagers regarded him with such respect, why they seemed to expect something from him. He had never sought their admiration, yet it clung to him like a burden he could not shake off. Now, this excerpt explores the relationship between Mugo and the villagers, who hold him in high esteem despite his own bewilderment at their admiration. Mugo's confusion about why the villagers respect him underscores his disconnect from the community and his own sense of unworthiness. This passage is important because it introduces the theme of expectations and the burdens they impose on individuals. The villagers project their hopes and ideals onto Mugo, seeing him as a symbol of resilience and leadership, even though he does not see himself in that light. This dynamic setup a tension between Mugo's internal struggle and the external expectations placed upon him, which becomes a central conflict in the novel. Mugo's inability to understand why the villagers respect him reflects his deep seated insecurities and his feelings of inadequacy. He views their admiration as an unwanted burden, something that clung to him and added to his already heavy emotional load. This metaphor highlights the oppressive nature of the villagers' expectations, which Mugo feels powerless to escape. The passage also tells the eventual revelation of Mugo's secret and the shattering of the villagers' idealized image of him. The theme of expectation versus reality. Here it is a recurring motif in the novel, where the characters are often confronted with the disparity between who they are and who others them to be. Same chapter, few more lines. Gikonvo, now this is another character. had returned to a village that was not the same as the one he had left. The people had changed, the land had changed, and even the air seemed different. He felt like a stranger in his own home. This is about Gikonwo's return and reflections on the change that has happened in the village. So I'll read it again. Gikonyo had returned to a village that was not the same as the one he had left. The people had changed, the land had changed, and even the air seemed different. He felt like a stranger in his own home. Now, this excerpt captures Gikonyo's sense of dislocation and estrangement upon his return to the village after being imprisoned during the Mau Mau rebellion. The chances are that the revolution that has been brought in the village and the people reflect the broader societal changes that have occurred during this absence, highlighting the theme of transformation and the passage of time. This passage is important because it illustrates the profound impact of the colonial struggle on both individuals and communities. Gikonyo's feeling of being a stranger in his own home underscores the theme of alienation and the difficulties of reintegration for those who have been displaced by conflict. The excerpt also reflects the larger theme of change and the challenges of adapting to a new reality in the post colonial period. Gikonuyo's observations about the changes in the village and the people reveals his internal struggle to reconcile the past with the present. He cannot accept the change. The village he knew once has been transformed by the events of the rebellion and the aftermath of the independence, leaving him feeling out of the place and disconnected. He's not used to such feeling, he's not used to such transformation. The phrase, even the air seemed different, suggests a fundamental shift in the atmosphere of the village, symbolizing the pervasive impact of historical events on everyday life. Gikonyo's sense of estrangement is a common experience among characters in post colonial literature, where the return to a changed homeland often leads to a feeling of displacement. This excerpt also sets the stage for Gikonyo's personal journey throughout the novel, as he struggles with the change in his own life and the lives of those around him. We move to the next chapter, chapter 3. There are few lines, a very important line in chapter 3. Here again we talk about Gikonyo's memories of Mumbai. So the lines are, Gikonios remembered how Mumbai had stood by him during the struggle, her quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. But now, as he looked at her, he saw a different woman, one marked by the trials of the years they had been apart, a woman who had learned to survive without him. So, even this causes him a feeling of displacement because even his wife seems to be a changed woman. I'll read the line again. Gikonvo remembered how Mumbai had stood by him during the struggle, her quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. But now, as he looked at her, he saw a different woman, one marked by the trials of the years they had been apart, a woman who had learned to survive without him. This passage delves deep into Gikonyo's memory of his wife, Mumbai, and how their relationship has changed after his return from imprisonment. Gikonyo's recollection of Mumbai's quiet strength and unwavering loyalty contrasts sharply with his current perception of her as someone changed by the hardships they both endured together, their separation. This signals a shift in their relationship and highlights the personal costs of the struggle for independence. This passage is important because it explores the theme of change, not simply the external world, but also the personal relationships. The years of separations have transformed both Kikonyo and Mumbai, and their reunion is tinged with the pain of lost time and the inevitable changes that life has wrought on them. This excerpt sets the stage for the complex emotional dynamics that will unfold between the characters as they navigate their new realities. Gikonyo's memories of Mumbai emphasize the emotional bond they used to share before the struggle disrupted their lives. His idealized image of her as a loyal and a supportive partner clashes with the reality of the woman she has become, a survivor of the struggle in her own right. This tension reflects the broader theme of disillusionment that permeates the novel, where the characters' expectations of each other and of life after independence often collide with harsh realities. The phrase, a woman who had learned to survive without him, tells Mumbai's resilience but also signals a growing distance between her and Gikonyo. His emotional distance is a microcosm of the broader societal rifts that have developed in the wake of the rebellion, where the shared struggle has not necessarily led to unity but rather to a deeper understanding of individual survival. In the same chapter, we also come across Mugo's internal conflict. The lines are: Mugo struggled with the voices in his head, one urging him to confess, to unburden his soul, the other whispering that silence was his only refuge. He felt trapped between the need for redemption and the fear for condemnation. I'll repeat. This passage talks about Mugo's internal conflict, and the lines are: Mugo struggled with the voices in his head, one urging him to confess, to unburden his soul, and the other whispering that silence was his only refuge. He felt trapped between the need for redemption and the fear of condemnation. This passage provides insight into Mugo's internal conflict as he struggles with his guilt and the weight of his secret. The voices in his head represent the dual pressures he faces: the desire to confess and free himself from the burden of his guilt, and the fear that revealing the truth will lead to his downfall. This passage is important because it encapsulates the central moral dilemma that drives Mugo's character throughout the novel. His struggle between confession and silence reflects the broader themes of truth, guilt, and redemption in the story. Mugo's internal conflict also highlights the psychological toll of living with a heavy secret, and now his inner turmoil isolates him from the rest of the community. The metaphor of the voices in his head illustrates the intensity of Mugo's internal struggle, where he is haunted by a deep sense of guilt and a desire to make amends for his past actions. The fear of condemnation reflects his terror of the consequences that a confession might bring, particularly in the community that reveres him. This excerpt also touches on the theme of silence and its implications. Mugo's silence is not just a refusal to speak, but a protective mechanism that shields him from the judgment of others. However, this silence also becomes a prison, trapping him in his own guilt and preventing him from finding peace. The tension between confession and silence will ultimately lead to a climatic resolution, making his internal conflict a driving force in the narrative. We'll move to the next chapter, chapter 4, where Mugo is again, uh, you know, is increasing the sense of isolation and how he is keeping himself aloof from the rest of the village. So the lines: Mugo walked through the village, feeling the eyes of the people on him. but he did not meet their gazes. He felt as if a wall separated him from the rest of the world, a wall built from the bricks of his own silence and guilt. This is again one of the important line from chapter 4, and you will find Mugos as a solitary figure and the sense of isolation throughout the novel. But each line is significant because he not only talks about, or he not only feels about the isolation that is killing him from inside, but his inability to express himself to the larger community where people actually respect him. So he's keeping himself emotionally distant from many people. Now, in this passage, Mugo's increasing sense of isolation from the rest of the village includes an imagery wall, a word called wall, made of bricks of his own silence and guilt. And it vividly illustrates how Mugo's internal struggles are manifesting in his external world. His inability to connect with others is not just a physical separation, but an emotional and psychological one. The significance of this passage lies in its exploration of the themes of isolation and guilt. Mugo's alienation is self imposed, a result of his deep seated guilt over his actions. The wall he feels around him symbolizes the barriers he has built between himself and the community, preventing him from experiencing genuine connection or relief from his emotional burdens. Mugo's walk through the village with the eyes of the people on him underscores his awareness of the expectations and scrutiny he faces. Yet, his choice not to meet their gazes reflects his fear and shame, which keeps him emotionally distant. The metaphor of the wall, built from the bricks of own silence and guilt, emphasizes the Mugo's isolation in a consequence of his internalized guilt, which has become formidable barrier between him and the rest of the world. Some more lines which talks about the relationship between Gikonyo and Mumbi. As you can see, in most of the chapters, the lines or the passages are pressed in such a manner that it clearly symbolizes the non-linear structure that we talked about. This is an important thing that you need to remember, that it talks about the non-linear structure. So characters come and go, they come with the flashbacks, they express themselves, and there is again lot of narration. Okay, so this is the same chapter where Kikonyo tried to reach out to Mumbai, but something had changed between them. Something intangible yet insurmountable. They shared the same pace, but it felt as though a great distance lay between them, a distance that had grown in the years of separation. This passage delves into the strained relationship between Gikonyo and Mumbai, emphasizing the emotional distance that has developed between them since Gikonyo's return from prison. The intangible yet insurmountable change between them reflects the deep impact that time and experience have had on their bond. This emotional distance is a recurring theme in the novel, highlighting the challenges of reconciling past relations. Priya, can you just mute, please? Priya, if I'm audible, can you please mute yourself? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So yeah, so here we were talking about the relationship between Gikonyo and Mumbi. Now, the significance of this passage lies in the portrayal of the personal costs of the struggle for independence. Gikonyo and Mumbi's relationship, which serves as a broader societal changes that have occurred where the shared experiences of struggle have not necessarily led to unity but have instead created rifts that are difficult to bridge. This dynamic is central to the novel's exploration of post colonial identity and the complexities of rebuilding relationships in the wake of trauma. The phrase, a great distance lay between them, metaphorically represents the emotional and the psychological gap that has emerged between Gikonyo and Mumbai. Despite being physically together, their shared experiences of pain and loss have created an invisible barrier that prevents them from truly connecting with each other. This distance is not just a result of their years staying apart from each other, but also a reflection of how the struggle for independence has fundamentally altered their identities and their relationship. The passage underscores the theme of alienation within personal relationships, a key element in the novel's broader exploration of post colonial life. It also raises questions about possibility of healing and reconciliation in the aftermath of deep personal and collective wounds. There is few lines in the same chapter that describes the symbolism of Uhuru celebration, of the celebration for freedom. The lines are, the upcoming Uhuru celebration was on everyone's lips. For the people of the village, it was not just a commemoration of independence, but a symbol of their resilience and hope for the future. Yet, for Mugo, the celebration felt like a looming shadow, a reminder of everything he had tried to forget. Now, this passage introduces independence or Uhuru celebration as a symbol of both collective joy and individual dread. For the villagers, the celebration represents the culmination of their struggle and their hopes for a brighter future. However, for Mugo, it symbolizes something far from ominous, a reminder of his guilt and the secrets he has been harboring. The significance of this passage lies in its exploration of the contrasting emotions tied to the concept of independence. While the community views freedom as a positive, unifying force, for Mugo it represents the inescapable weight of his past actions. This duality underscores the novel's theme of conflicting emotions in the post colonial context, where independence is both a cause for celebration and a source of personal turmoil for those who carry unresolved guilt. The Uhuru celebration is depicted as a symbol of resilience and a hope for the villagers who see it as a validation of their sacrifices and a promise of a better future. However, for Mugo, the same celebration is fraught with anxiety and fear. It brings his past deeds to the forefront of his mind. The looming shadow here of the celebration is a powerful metaphor for the way Mugo's guilt overshadows any sense of joy or relief that independence might bring. This passage highlights the theme of memory and its impact on individual in the post-colonial era. While the village looks forward to Uhuru with optimism, Mogo's past events prevents him from fully participating in his collective joy. We move to the next chapter, chapter 5, where we talk about Mumbi's strength and religions. Mumbi stood by the door, her face set in a mask of determination. She had seen much, suffered much, but there was still fire in her eyes, a fire that spoke of endurance and the unyielding will to survive. This excerpt captures Mumbi's character as a symbol of resilience and inner strength. Her mask of determination and the fire in her eyes signify her unbroken spirit despite the hardships she had endured. Mumbi's character represents the endurance of every woman in the face of adversity, particularly in the context of Kenya's struggle for independence and the subsequent societal challenges. The significance of this passage lies in its portrayal of Mombi as more than just a passive character. Instead, she embodies the struggle and resilience of those who were left to pick up the pieces in the wake of the conflict. Her strength and determination are emblematic of the broader experience of many Kenyan women who had to survive and support their families while dealing with the trauma of war and the absence of their men. Mumbi's position by the door is symbolic of her role as both a witness and a participant in the events unfolding around her. She is not just a passive observer, but someone who has been actively shaped by the circumstances she has faced. The fire in her eyes symbolizes her inner strength, which has not been extinguished despite the suffering she was experiencing. This fire represents hope, endurance, and a refusal to be defeated, making Mumbi a central figure in the novel's exploration of resilience. Her character challenges traditional gender roles by showing that women are not just passive victims but active participants in the struggle for survival and dignity. This passage is important because it underscores the novel's broader themes of resistance and empowerment, highlighting the crucial role of women in post colonial narratives. In the same chapter, we also see Gikonyo's internal struggle. The lines Gikonyo tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering back to Mumbai, to the time before the war, before everything changed. He felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the life they once had, but for the man he used to be. This passage delves into Gikonyo's internal conflict and sense of loss. His inability to focus on his work reflects his preoccupation with the past and the changes that have occurred in his life. The passage reveals his nostalgia for the life he once had with Mumbai and his mourning for the person he used to be before the war. This sense of loss is not only personal but also reflective of the broader changes that have affected the entire community. The significance of this passage lies in its exploration of the psychological impact of war and political struggle on individuals. Gikonyo's character represents the challenges of adapting to a new reality after a period of intense conflict. His struggle to reconcile his past with his present underscores the theme of identity and the difficulty of moving forward after profound change. Gikonyo's wandering thoughts indicate his emotional turmoil and the unresolved grief he feels over the changes in his life. The deep sense of loss he experiences is multifaceted. He mourns both his past relationship with Mumbai and his own loss sense of self. This passage highlights the psychological scars left by the war, suggesting that struggle for independence has come at a great personal cost. Gikonyo's internal struggle also reflects the broader theme of disillusionment in the post colonial era. The idealism and hope that once motivated him have been replaced by a sense of disconnection and loss. His character illustrates the complex emotional landscape of individuals who must navigate the aftermath of political and social upheaval. So we stop here to take a break. You can go ahead to have a tea break, and we come back to delve more into the other chapters. We'll start from chapter 6. We'll pick more lines, we'll do more analysis, and we will discuss on that. Please take a break. Okay, can we begin? Are you all there? Can we begin? Can we continue? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Abhi. Okay, so we are going to start with chapter 6. In chapter 6, just give me a second. Yeah, okay. So we could complete 5 chapters before the break, and I'll try my best to complete as much as possible in the remaining time. So we begin with chapter 6, and here the most essential uh, chapter or the lines, sorry, most essential lines are Koranja's ambition. Koranja's eyes gleamed with ambition as he spoke of the future, a future where he would no longer be a mere servant, but a man of power and influence. He saw the chaos of the times as an opportunity, a chance to rise above the others and claim his place at the top. The lines clearly signify Koranja's ambition. I'll read it again. Koranja's eyes gleamed with ambition as he spoke of the future, a future where he would no longer be a mere servant, but a man of power and influence. He saw the chaos of the times as an opportunity, a chance to rise above the others and claim his place at the top. Now, this passage reveals Koranja's ambitious nature and his desire to use the political and social upheaval to his advantage. His gleaming eyes signify his hunger for power and his willingness to seize any opportunity that presents itself, even if it means betraying others. The passage is important as it portrays the theme of ambition and the moral compromises that often accompany it. Koronja represents a character who is driven by self interest and a desire for power, even at the cost of his integrity. This character serves as a foil to others in the novel who are motivated by ideals of freedom and justice, highlighting the complex motivations that drive individuals in time of crisis. Koranja's ambition is emblematic of the broader theme of opportunism in the novel. His desire to rise above others reflects the way in which some individuals view times of chaos and conflict as opportunities for personal gain. Koranja's character contrasts with those who are fighting for collective liberation, as his focus is solely on his own advancement. Now, this passage, you will find that this passage explores the theme of power and at the same time the corrupting influence. Koranja's ambition blinds him to the moral implications of his actions and his pursuit of power, ultimately leading to his alienation from the community. His character raises question about the cost of ambition and the ways in which the pursuit of power can lead to moral decay. So this is also one of the important character where we see Koranja is so ambitious that he is ready to compromise with his own integrity. So we move to the next chapter where the lines talk about Mugo's dream. We do some analysis and also we also try to understand the significance of it. Mugo dreamt that he was standing alone in a vast empty field. The sky above him was dark, and the air was heavy with the scent of impending rain. In the distance, he could see a crowd of people moving towards him. their faces blurred and indistinguishable. He felt a surge of fear, knowing that they were coming for him, but he was rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. This passage from chapter 7 delves into Mugo's subconscious mind, revealing his deep seated fears and anxieties. The dream symbolizes his growing sense of guilt and his fear of being discovered as a traitor. The vast empty field represents his isolation, while the dark sky and the scent of impending rain convey a sense of foreboding and inevitable doom. The faceless crowd symbolizes the community that Mugo feels disconnected from but is also fearful of confronting. The significance of his dream lies in its exploration of the psychological torment that Mugo experiences. It encapsulates his fear of exposure and the inner conflict that torments him. The dream foreshadows the eventual confrontation between Mugo and the community, highlighting the theme of guilt and the burden of secrecy that runs throughout the novel. Mugo's dream is a manifestation of his inner turmoil and the heavy weight of his guilt. It is significant because Mugo's character and the broader themes of the novel are very much integrated. His internal struggle is not just about fear of exposure, but also about excuse me, the moral and emotional consequences of his betrayal. In the same chapter, we see the most difficult part of the novel, where Mumbi is confessing something to Gikonyo. Let us read the lines. Mumbi lowered her eyes as she spoke, her voice trembling with emotions. I did not want to hurt you, Gikonyo, but when you were gone, Koranja was here, and I was so lonely. I needed someone, anyone to hold on to help me survive. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. In this passage, Mumbi confesses her infidelity to Gikonyo, revealing the emotional and the psychological strain she endured during his absence. Her confession is laden with guilt and sorrow as she tries to explain her actions while also seeking forgiveness. The phrase, I needed someone, just anyone to hold on to, highlights her desperation and vulnerability during a time of great personal hardship. The significance of this passage lies in its exploration of the complexities of human relationships and the impact of external circumstances on personal choices. Mumbi's confession adds depth to her character, portraying her as a woman torn between her love for Gikonyo and the harsh realities of life during the struggle for independence. The theme of forgiveness and the possibility of reconciliation are central to this moment, as Gikonyo must struggle with his own feelings of betrayal and the challenge of rebuilding their relationship. Mumbi's confession here in this chapter is a pivotal moment in the novel, as it forces her and Gikonyo to confront the emotional scars left by the Mau Mau rebellion and its aftermath. Her infidelity is not portrayed as a simple moral failing, but as a consequence of the immense pressure and isolation she faced during Gikonyo's imprisonment. This passage underscores the theme of survival and the difficult choices that individuals must make in extreme circumstances. The passage also highlights the theme of forgiveness and the possibility of healing in the wake of betrayal. Gikonyo's reaction to Mumbi's confession and the subsequent development of their relationship reflect the broader societal need for reconciliation and understanding in post colonial Kenya. The emotional intensity of this moment captures the personal cost of political and social upheaval, emphasizing the need for compassion and empathy in the face of human frailty. In the same chapter, we also see Koranjas getting back and he's reflecting on power. Koranja stood at the edge of the village, staring out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. He felt a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. He had achieved what he wanted: power, status, recognition. But the price had been high. He was alone, despised by those he had once considered friends. Power, he realized, was a lonely place. This passage, it captures a moment of introspection for Karanja as he reflects on his pursuit of power and the consequences that has brought. The long shadows cast by the setting sun symbolize the dark and isolating effects of his ambition. While Karanja has achieved his goals, the strange mix of triumph and emptiness suggests that his success has come at the cost of personal relationship and inner peace. The significance of this passage lies in this exploration of the theme of power and its corrupting influence. Karanja realization that power was a lonely place serves as a critic of the pursuit of power for its own sake. His isolation and the loss of his friendship highlights the moral and emotional costs of his action, offering a poignant commentary on the nature of ambition and the hollow victory it often brings. Koranja's reflection on power is a moment of self awareness that reveals the futility of his ambitions. Throughout the novel, Koranja is depicted as a character driven by desire for status and recognition, often at the expense of others. This passage marks a turning point in his character as he comes to understand the true cost of his action. The imagery of the setting sun and the long shadows emphasizes the transient and ultimately unsatisfying nature of power. Koranja's loneliness and the disdain of those around him illustrate the isolation that often accompanies the pursuit of power. This passage serves as a moral lesson on the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of human connection and integrity. Karanja's realization also ties into the broader themes of the novel, particularly the impact of colonialism on individuals and communities. His pursuit of power can be seen as a response to disempowerment and marginalization experienced under colonial rule, but it ultimately leads to his own moral and social downfall. Chapter 8, where Mugo's confession is seen, is making to Gikonyo. Mugo's lips quivered as he looked into Gikonyo's eyes, searching for something, perhaps understanding, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps the courage to speak the truth that had been gnawing at him for years. He opened his mouth, but the words refused to come out. The silence between them grew heavy, charged with unspoken confessions and the weight of their shared history. The passage captures a pivotal moment in the relationship between Mugo and Gikonyo. Mugo is on the brink of confessing his betrayal, but he hesitates, overcome by fear and guilt. The passage also highlights Mugo's inner turmoil that had been seen throughout the passage and the intense emotional struggle he faces as he contemplates revealing the truth to Gikonyo. The significance of this passage lies in its exploration of the themes of guilt and confession. Mugo's inability to speak reflects his deep seated fear of the consequences of his actions and his desire for understanding and forgiveness. The heavy silence between Mugo and Gikonyo symbolizes the unspoken truths that have strained their relationship and burden of the past that weighs heavily on both men. Mugo's hesitation to confess to Gikonyo reveals the complexity of his emotional state. Despite his desire to unburden himself, he is paralyzed by fear unable to confront the reality of his betrayal. The silence between the two men is filled with unspoken emotions, creating a tense atmosphere that underscores the gravity of the situation. The passage is important because it delves into the psychological impact of guilt and the difficulty of seeking redemption. Mugo's struggle to confess is a reflection of the broader theme of moral conflict in the novel, as characters grapple with the consequences of their actions in the aftermath of colonialism. The passage also highlights the theme of communication or the lack thereof as a barrier to reconciliation and understanding. As the chapter proceeds, we find uh, some lines where the women are actually talking to each other, and this is regarding the women's committee meeting. The lines are: the women gathered in a tight circle, their faces edged with determination. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices blending into a single powerful current of resolve. It was not just the future of their children they were fighting for, it was the dignity of their entire community. They had been silent for too long, and now they were ready to take action. This passage describes a crucial moment where the women of the village come together to discuss their role in the struggle for independence. The imagery of the women gathered in a tight circle and their voices blending into a single powerful current emphasizes the unity and strength of their collective resolve. The significance of this passage lies in its portrayal of the role of women in the fight for independence. The Women's Committee represents a shift from passivity to active participation, challenging the traditional gender roles that have often marginalized women in political movements. The passage underscores the importance of women's voices in the struggle for dignity and justice, highlighting their agency and resilience. The women's gathering is a powerful symbol of collective actions and solidarity. A tight circle they form represents their unity, while their voices blending into a single current suggest a shared sense of purpose and determination. The meaning marks a turning point in the narrative as the women transition from being bystanders to active participants in the fight for their community's future. The passage highlights the novel's focus on the role of women in the post colonial struggle. It challenges the patriarchal structure that has historically excluded women from political discourse, emphasizing their vital contributions to the resistance movement. The passage also reinforces the theme of collective action, showing how unity and resolve can empower marginalized groups to take control of their destiny. In the same chapter, we also come to cross over a character, Kihika. Here we see what the lines are written for her, for Kihika. Kihika's name was spoken with reverence, his memory kept alive by the stories that circulated through village. To the people, he was more than a martyr. He was a symbol of their resistance, a beacon of hope that guided them through the darkest times. His legacy was etched into the very fabric of their lives, an indelible mark that no amount of time could erase. This passage tells the lasting impact of Kihika's legacy on the village and its people. Kihika is remembered not just as a martyr but as a symbol of the resistance movement, embodying the hope and determination of those who continue to fight for their freedom. The significance of this passage focuses on the exploration of the power of memory and the role of martyrs in shaping collective identity. Kihika's legacy serves as a source of inspiration for the villagers, reminding them of the sacrifices made in the name of independence. The passage tells the novel's theme of resistance and enduring influence of those who have fought for justice. Kihika's memory is kept alive through the stories shared by the villagers, which serve as a meaning of preserving his legacy and passing it on to future generations. His status as a symbol of resistance elevates him beyond a mere historical figure, turning him into a guiding force for the community. The passage is important where the novel actually focuses on the importance of memory and the role of martyrs in sustaining the spirit of resistance. Kihika's legacy represents the enduring impact of the struggle for independence, serving as a reminder of the sacrifices made and the ongoing fight for justice. The passage also emphasizes the power of storytelling in preserving history and shaping collective identity. We move to chapter 9, where uh, there are few lines where there is Mugo reflecting on betrayal. There are few lines from the gathering storm. So we start first with Mugo's reflection on betrayal. As Mugo sat alone in his dimly lit room, the weight of his betrayal pressed heavily upon him. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating him with memories of Kihika's face, his pleas, and the moment of cowardice that had sealed Mugo's fate. Each creak of the floorboards beneath him was a reminder of his past decisions, a constant reminder of his failure to act when it mattered most. This passage talks about Mugo's deep sense of guilt and self loathing as he reflects on his past betrayal of Kihika. The imagery of the dimly lit room and the walls closing in symbolizes Mugo's psychological confinement and his struggle to escape the weight of his guilt. The creaks of the floorboards serve as a metaphor for the persistent reminders of his failures. The significance of this passage explores the theme of internal conflict and the burden of betrayal. Mugo's reflection on his cowardice underscores the psychological torment that he endures as he struggles with his own actions. The passage focuses on the novel's main theme on the consequences of moral failure and the emotional toll of living with guilt. Mugo's solitude in the dimly lit room represents his isolation from the outside world. The physical space mirrors his internal state, where memories of his betrayal loom large and unrelenting. The creek floorboards are symbolic representation of the constant presence of his guilt, which follows him and reinforces his sense of failure. In the next few lines, we see that the there is a storm, the gathering storm, and the lines read something like this: The village was abuzz with whispers of unrest. People spoke in hushed tones about the mounting pressures from both the colonial authorities and local elites who sought to undermine their progress. The storm that had long been brewing was now on the horizon, and the tension in the air was palpable. The unity of the people was being tested as they faced external threats and internal divisions. This passage captures the growing tension and the sense of impending conflict within the village. The gathering storm serves as a metaphor for the escalating pressure and the challenges faced by the community, both from colonial authorities and local elites. The passage highlights the fragile nature of unity and the potential for internal divisions to undermine collective efforts. There is a portrayal of the external and internal conflicts that impact the village struggle for independence. The imagery of storm conveys the intensity of the situation and looming threat of upheaval. The passage tells the theme of political struggle and the challenges of maintaining solidarity in the face of adversity. The buzz of unrest and the palpable tension reflects the growing sense of crisis within the village. The storm metaphor emphasizes the severity of the situation, suggesting that the community is on the brink of significant upheaval. The passage highlights the dual pressure faced by the villagers and the difficulties in sustaining unity amidst external and internal threats. We move on to the next lines where we see a role of tradition. In the midst of the turmoil, the elders gathered to discuss the role of tradition in their struggle for independence. They debated whether to adhere strictly to the old ways or to adapt their strategies to the changing circumstances. The clash between traditional values and modern realities was at the forefront of their discussion, revealing the deep seated tensions between preserving cultural heritage and pursuing progress. This passage addresses the tension between the tradition and modernity, with the village's struggle for independence. The elders' debate about whether to adhere to traditional values or adapt to new realities reflects the broader conflict between maintaining cultural heritage and responding to evolving political and social conditions. The passage signifies the theme of cultural preservation versus progress. The clash between traditional values and modern realities highlights the complexities of navigating change while honoring the cultural heritage. The passage tells on the impact of colonialism on traditional societies and challenges of reconciling old and new. The elders' debate represents a crucial moment in the narrative as it reflects the internal struggles within the community regarding their approach to independence. The discussion about tradition versus adaptation illustrates the difficulty of balancing respect for cultural heritage with the need for progress in the face of change. This passage is important as it explores the impact of colonialism on traditional societies and the challenges of navigating cultural change. It emphasizes the theme of reconciling tradition with modernity and the complexities of maintaining cultural identity amidst political and social transformation. We now move to chapter 10, where there is a village meeting going on. The village meeting was filled with a palpable sense of urgency. Voices rose and fell like the tide, each speaker adding to the cacophony of discontent. The elders and leaders struggled to maintain order as the villagers voiced their frustration and demands. The meeting had become more than just a discussion. It was a crucible of resistance where the future of their community was being forged. This passage it captures the chaotic atmosphere of a village meeting where the community's frustration and demands are voiced. The imagery of voices rising and falling like the tide conveys the intensity and emotional charge of the meeting. The description of the meeting as a crucible of resistance highlights its role as a pivotal moment in the community's struggle for change. This passage is important as it depicts the collective actions and resistance of the villagers. The meeting represents a crucial moment where the community comes together to address their grievances and discuss their future. The passage underscores the theme of collective struggle and the importance of unity in the fight for social and political change. The cacophony of voices and the struggle for order at meeting reflects the intensity of the community's discontent and their determination to address pressing issues. The meeting serves as a focal point for communities' resistance, illustrating the novel's exploration of grassroots activism and the role of communal decision making in the struggle for independence. It emphasizes the theme of unity and the importance of coming together to address shared challenges. In the same chapter, we see Gikonyo's vision, where lines like Gikonyo's vision for the future of the village was clear and compelling. He spoke of a society where justice and equality would prevail, where the scars of colonialism would be healed, and where every individual would have the opportunity to thrive. His words were imbued with hope and conviction, a beacon of light in amidst of the darkness that had enveloped their lives. This passage presents Giconio's vision for the future, characterized by the ideals of justice, equality, and healing from the scars of colonialism. His vision is described as a beacon of light, symbolizing hope and conviction in the face of adversity. The passage emphasizes Giconio's role as a leader and his commitment to create a better future for the village. In this passage, the author tries to showcase Giconio's aspiration and the hope that he represents for the community. His vision reflects the broader theme of post colonial reconstruction and the desire for a more equitable society. The passage highlights the role of visionary leadership in inspiring and guiding the community towards a brighter future. Giconio's vision represents an optimistic and forward looking perspective on community's future. His emphasis on justice and equality reflects the core values driving the struggle for independence. The description of his words as a beacon of light underscores the power of hope and conviction in overcoming the challenges faced by the community. In the same chapter, the next important lines where we see the impact of betrayal. The betrayal of trust was a wound that would not heal easily. Mugo's actions had caused a rift in the fabric of their community, and the repercussions were felt far beyond his immediate circle. The sense of betrayal lingered like a shadow, affecting relationships and trust among the villagers. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of human bonds and the long lasting effects of personal failure. In this passage, we see there is a profound impact of Mogo's betrayal on the community. The imagery of wound is there, where we can see that it is not going to heal easily, and it conveys the deep and enduring nature of the betrayal. This passage highlights the broader repercussions of Mogo's actions affecting relationships and trust within the village. This passage is important because it explores the theme of betrayal and its consequences. The novel focuses on the personal and communal effects of moral failure, illustrating how individual actions can have far reaching implications. We now move to chapter 11, where we again see Mugo is in isolation. He's walking through a village. The theme of alienation is again found. Okay, so this goes on. However, there is one more important line that is that describes the burden of leadership as people turn to him expecting guidance, where they believe that Mugo can be their leader. This is giving him a burden. So let's read the line. People had turned to him expecting guidance, expecting him to lead them through the storm of their independence. But Mugo felt nothing but emptiness, a hollow echo in his soul where conviction should have been. He was a man caught in a role he had never wanted, a leader in the name of a leader in name only, unable to find the strength, to fulfill the expectations placed upon him. The, exp- the excerpt explores Mugo's struggle with the expectations of leadership that the villagers have placed upon him. Despite being seen as a leader, Mugo feels overwhelmed. There is a sense of emptiness, inadequacy. The hollow echo in his soul highlights the internal void which is left by his betrayal and his inability to reconcile with his past. Passage focuses on the complexities of leadership in post-colonial context and which is faced by individuals who are seen as symbols of resistance or independence but who may not possess the internal resources to fulfill such roles. There is a bit of memory of Kihika. So Kihika's faint face keeps on haunting Mugo in his dreams. So that is also a highlight of this chapter. Kihika's face haunted Mugo in his dreams, a constant reminder of the man he had betrayed. In his mind, Kihika was no longer just a man, but a symbol of everything that Mugo had lost: the courage, the conviction, the sense of purpose that had once defined him. Memory of Kihika was like a shadow that followed him everywhere, a ghost that refused to be led to rest. This passage talks about Mugo's psychological torment as he is haunted by the memory of Kihika, the man he betrayed. Kihika's transformation from a man into a symbol in Mugo's mind reflects the deep sense of loss and regret that plagues Mugo. The memory of Kihika serves as a constant reminder of Mugo's failure and the moral compromises that have stripped him of his courage and purpose. The haunting memory of Mihika is central element of Mugo's character as it represents the psychological burden of his betrayal. Kihika's face in Mugo's dreams is a symbol of moral and emotional weight that Mugo carries, a weight that has eroded his sense of self and purpose. Now, this passage is really important because it highlights the novel's exploration of the psychological consequences of betrayal. Mugo's inability to escape the memory of Mihika underscores the theme of inescapable guilt and the way in which unresolved moral conflicts can dominate a person's consciousness. We next move to chapter 12, where we see there is an internal conflict in Koranja. Koranja stood at the edge of the village, watching the preparations for the Uhuru celebration. He felt a mixture of pride and shame, a pride in new nation that was being born, but a shame in his own actions that has secured him a place among the colonizers. The weight of his betrayal was heavy on his shoulders, yet he could not bring himself to step forward and join the others. He was a man caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. This passage explores Koranja's internal conflict as he grapples with the feelings of pride for Kenya's independence and shame for his collaboration with the colonial authorities. He conflicted his conflicted emotions highlighted the novel's theme of betrayal and the moral complexities faced by those who collaborated with the colonizers. The image of Koranja, caught between two worlds, symbolizes his sense of alienation and the difficulty he faced in reconciling his actions with the new reality of independence. The internal conflict here is a key element of Koranja's character, and this reflects the broader theme of moral ambiguity in the novel. His pride in the birth of a new nation is overshadowed by the shame of his betrayal, illustrating the novel's exploration of personal cost of collaboration. We move to the next chapter, chapter 13, where there is Mugo's internal turmoil seen again. Mugo sat alone in his hut, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. He felt trapped, as though the walls were closing in on him, suffocating him with their silence. The weight of his secret was unbearable, pressing down on him with a force that threatened to crush his very soul. He wanted to scream, to confess, to free himself from the burden, but the fear held him back, paralyzing him in his loneliness. This passage talks about Mugo's psychological state as he struggles with the overwhelming guilt and fear associated with his betrayal of Kihika. The imagery of the walls closing in and suffocating him with their silence powerfully conveys Mugo's intense feeling of isolation and entrapment. His storm of conflicting emotions reflect the internal battle between his desire to confess and his fear of the consequences. Mugo's internal conflict is a central element of the novel, and is excerpt in this excerpt it's provided the glimpse into the depth of his psychological anguish. This passage is important because it captures the essence of Mugo's character as an individual, who is torn between conflicting emotions and unable to find peace. It also reflects the broader theme of the cost of betrayal, not just in terms of his impact on others, but on the betrayer's own mental and emotional well being. The last few lines from this chapter on Gikon's disillusionment. Gikon stared at the barren land, the fields that once promised prosperity, now lying fallow and empty. The dreams he had held onto during the long years in detention seemed like cruel jokes now, taunting him with their unfulfilled promises. He had returned to a world that no longer made sense, with the values he had cherished were crumbling before his eyes. The land, like his spirit, had been broken by forces of history. The passage speaks about the disillusionment with the post independence reality, which is poignantly expressed through the imagery of the barren land and the fields lying fallow. These images serve as metaphors for Gikonkyo's shattered dreams and the sense of betrayal he feels after years of fighting for independence. The crumbling values and the broken land reflect the broader disillusionment experienced by many in the wake of independence, as the promises of freedom and prosperity failed to materialize. If we go to conclude with the the novel, there is this last chapter, chapter 14, which talks about Mugo's confession, finally, that he does. Mugo felt the words rising in his throat, choking him with their urgency. I am the one, he finally said, his voice trembling. I betrayed Kihika. I was the one who told the white man where to find him. A stunned silence fell over the crowd as they absorbed the weight of his confession. This passage is one of the most crucial moments in A Grain of Wheat, as Mugo publicly confesses his betrayal of Mihika, a revered freedom fighter. The words rising in his throat symbolize the intense internal struggle Mugo has faced with his guilt and the burden of secrecy finally become unbearable. The passage lies in its explorations, importance lies in its in this passage, which speaks about the themes of guilt, redemption, and the collective trauma of the community. Mugo confesses what he had to confess since the very beginning, but he could not. Now it disrupts the community's expectation. He has been revered as a hero and a potential leader. His admission of betrayal forces the community to confront the complexity of human nature, where even those who are admired can harbor dark secrets. The moral ambiguity inherent in the struggle for independence here is what the novel explores in this particular line. because betrayal is not portrayed as a simple act of treachery, but as a complex decision shaped by fear, isolation, and psychological trauma. This is how the chapter ends, and the title of the novel, A Grain of Wheat, it carries profound symbolic meaning, that it reflects the novel's themes and underlying messages. There is this symbolism of wheat, a grain of wheat. The verse speaks to the idea of sacrifice and transformation. In the context of novel, the idea tells about the individual sacrifices, such as those made by the characters in the fight for independence, which are necessary for the greater good and the growth of the community. There is transformation, there is renewal. A grain of wheat represents potential and the possibility of transformation. In agricultural terms, a grain must die or be planted to give rise to a new life. Similarly, the novel's characters here undergo personal and collective struggles that lead to societal transformation. The sacrifices and efforts contribute to broader struggle for independence and social changes. There are a lot of personal sacrifices seen for collective gain. There is rebirth not only of a nation, there is also personal redemption, there is betrayal, there is healing. In all, A Grain of Wheat is a deeply symbolic title that reflects the novel's themes of sacrifice, transformation, and collective struggle. It draws from biblical imagery to emphasize the importance of personal and collective sacrifice in achieving greater societal change and renewal. So, here we end with today's novel, Ngugi's Wa Thiong'o's A Grain of Wheat. Okay, so we are done here. We'll meet again tomorrow with a new chapter, with a new book.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nina, tell me.
Ma'am, can you please tell me the rescheduled date of MEG 5, 7, 10, and 14?
Nina, actually, I'm not the right person who can give you the brief about the rescheduled dates. I would request you to kindly talk to the coordinator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Rachel, yes, we can discuss the questions of this chapter. Mostly you can take some notes if I can share some notes with you. Mostly the themes, okay, the chapters and the excerpts, the passages that I've just talked about. I'm sure you carry the materials which has been given to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So if you have those materials, you can have a check. Okay. So basically, just give me a
Ma'am, I
second.
want the PDF of this chapter.
PDF of the book you are talking.
Yes.
Uh, yeah. Okay. I will let you know because I don't carry the PDF of for the entire. I don't carry the book actually. But still, if I find it, I'll definitely share it.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. You may all leave.